as you guys were coming in. I am excited to get to come back to Mississippi. This will be my 4th time facilitating the A&I Institutes with your instructors. I love Mississippi. It is near and dear to my heart. I'm in Georgia, and I feel right at home when I come to visit. So I'm excited to get to work there again. I encourage all of you who have gone through an AI training, as we go through this webinar, I'd like you to share out some of your own personal experiences, some of the things you experienced as a participant in those Institutes 1 and 3 in particular, as well as any things you've seen or observed with your teachers after they completed the A&I Institutes. Share some of those things because your experience is unique and can add some insight to the ones who are new to this. As we go through today, you can take a look at what we're going to be working on. You can get a look at what the next hour will entail. I'd like for us to get a quick introduction out from those who are here. You can unmute yourselves. If you are not with audio, you can use the chat box to share. I'd like people to share out your name, what program you represent, and also maybe share if you've previously attended an A&I training. And Tiara, if you can help by kind of keeping an eye on the chat box for me, that would be great.
Most certainly will.
Thank you. Who wants to go first? I have never known Mississippi to be shy people, so. Who do we have on?
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Suzanne Thompson with Mississippi Delta Community College, and I have not been through an A&I Institute before.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Miranda Frison. I'm the director of the pre-release program here at the Mississippi State Penitentiary, and this will be my first experience with A&I.
Excellent. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Carolyn Williams at Southwest Mississippi Community College. I did attend. It was my binder that I'm looking at has 2011, so it's been a minute. But what I remember most is the interaction, how interactive the sessions were, where, you know, we got the students involved up out of their chairs and moving around and doing things. So that's what comes to mind first and foremost is the activity, the engagement.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. And that was the first year that we did A&I in Mississippi. So you're a seasoned veteran.
Okay. So that's my memory.
All right. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So Heidi, we have others who are responding in the chat box.
Okay.
We have Miss Carol King from Rankin County School District. She went through the program several years ago and she stated that it was so much fun.
Wonderful.
Karen Godet from Copiah Lincoln or Co-Lin attended A&I in 2011 as well, along with Priscilla Burns.
Hi, this is Earlene Smith from Holmes Community College. I was having some audio difficulties, so I had to call on the phone. But I've never attended A&I orientation seminar. I'm looking forward to the first session on October 8th.
Wonderful. Glad you could make it to the webinar.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Christy Johnson from Holmes Community College, and this is my first experience with A&I.
Registration continues for the fall semester at Holmes Community.
Glad to have you with us, Christy.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Others may join in or share out with the chat. We'll catch up with them as we go through. So the next several slides that you're going to take a look at really give you a brief overview of the research from the PIAC study. And what it does is it highlights why we need to increase our work with numeracy in our classrooms. In 2012, there were 24 countries that agreed to come together and evaluate 166,000 adults between the ages of 16 and 65 with the purpose of measuring their literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving skills. And the test was made available in both print and digital formats. Each country provided their own sampling of the participants. Some countries provided as few as 4,500 people for the study, and others had as many as 27,300 participants. And included in the evaluation was background information on the participants. And as they were gathering that background information, if they deemed an individual had some low literacy skills, then he or she was given an additional assessment for basic reading component skills. Also, while they were gathering that information, they looked for what soft skills people had that they were using in their home life and at work as well. You can see from this screen that the countries that participated in 2012, and we'll look at those outcomes for those 2012 countries on several other slides. You'll also see on the right-hand side that 9 more countries were evaluated in 2015 as part of a second phase of that PIAC study. And I know this slide is nearly impossible to see the details of the data, but here is basically what you need to understand on this slide. Right in the middle, in the green in particular, you'll see the numeracy. And so on the left-hand side is literacy, the right-hand side is the problem-solving skills, but numeracy in the middle. The US is third from the bottom. And what this is demonstrating is that out of the PIAC study, we found that the US performance in each domain, whether it was literacy, numeracy, or problem-solving skills, each domain is significantly below the international average. And the fact that the US is third from the bottom, just above Italy and Spain when it comes to numeracy, really highlights where we have a lot to continue to grow from. This particular piece of data also may be difficult to see, but what it shares with us is that 1 in 3 US adults have low numeracy skills. And the PIAC trends showed some significant decline in US skills that started back in the mid-1990s. This slide in particular highlights that the US performance in numeracy is below the international average at all age cohorts. So it's not just across each domain, it's also at each individual, these groupings of 10-year spans. Every age cohort saw this below international average outcome. In the United States, numeracy, the US gaps are larger by educational attainment, income, and skill level of job, but they're similar to the international average by employment status. So the gaps are larger no matter how much, well, as education attainment, the gap between what numeracy skills we have and those who do not continues to grow, as the same outcome is happening with income as well as skill level on a job. Employment doesn't seem to have as big of an a defining factor in that though. Another statistic that came out of the PIAC study has to do with gender comparison. And in the US, females are performing significantly lower than their male counterparts. And the gap between the males and the females is larger in the US than the international average. And so you can hear just from each of these few slides that there's a trend in how the US is performing against international adults in that 16 to 65 age range. So now that we've seen the need for improved numeracy skills with adults in the US, let's talk about how the ANI professional development can help with that. We're going to look at some data from the ANI field test and from the LINCS ANI PD offerings. The field test was actually conducted between 2010 and 2011 in 2 states, Arkansas and Georgia. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the 20 teachers who got to participate in the Georgia pilot of this field study, or pilot of this ANI PD. And that's where I got invested in what this was doing and got to put it into practice in my own classroom. So I have my own firsthand experience with this as a teacher, but then also later as a trainer. To date, Lynx has led the ANI PD trainings in 24 states, and you can see those on the slide. This includes the pilot states. So basically, this is showing you that nearly half the country has included ANI PD into their adult ed professional development offerings. And many of these states have hosted it multiple times, just like Mississippi has. And this is, like I said, this is our 4th time coming to Mississippi. So what this tells me is that those states that have invested in it, many of them have seen growth, or they've seen change, they've seen positive outcomes from this, and it's encouraging them to bring the training back. Others have had multiple years, and they've invited their own state trainers to learn those skills, and they become their own trainers within the state, and Lynx hands the reins over to them. And that's what we're actually going to be doing in Mississippi this go around as well. So this morning, Tiara shared with you in the reminder email some questions, including the 3 that you see on this slide. And what I'd like to do is to invite some volunteers to share an answer from 1 or 2 of these questions, just real short response. You can unmute yourself. You can also chat, type your chat response. The 3 questions, if you're not looking at a screen, are: why do you want your program to participate? We have limited space for who gets to participate in these, so not every program necessarily can participate. So why did you want to participate? What do you want to see as an outcome of this PD opportunity for your program? And the final question is: what will change as a result of your participation in this? What will be different? So I invite anyone to share.
Okay, the reason why we want to participate is math has always, for years, it's been a weakness of most of our students. When they take the GED exam, it's the test that's failed most often. And so that's one of the reasons why, you know, we want to participate, because we want to tackle that problem. It has been a problem over the years for our students. And it says, what do you want to see as an outcome of the PD opportunity for your program? I'm hoping that after the teachers attend, they will have more of a confidence level of how to attack the problem. And, you know, we'll start on it first. That's going to be our first test for every student, we hope, is that instead of saving math for last, they'll attack it first. And the third question, what will change as a result? That would be our goal, is to start with math. We're going to start all of our students working on math skills first, rather than saving math skills for last.
I like that. It's a great goal.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Was that Caroline or Christy that we just heard from?
That was Caroline.
Great.
Carolyn, yes.
Carolyn,
Carolyn.
yeah.
Thanks, Carolyn.
And we have a response in the chat box from Miranda Fryson at the Department of Correction. She stated that she said, I feel better equipped instructors will yield more EFL gains. So that is one reason.
Okay, great. Thanks, Miranda. Anyone else?
Hey, this is, excuse me, this is Christy. I agree with the comment earlier that I think that there just tends to be, on the student side and sometime on the instructor side, there just seems to be an intimidation when it comes to math. And any help that we can get to build the confidence of the instructors so that they can therefore build the confidence of the students when it comes to math, all the better.
Great. Thank you.
I'm looking. This is Earlene Smith from Holmes Community College. I'm hoping to be able to get more creative ways of teaching math, some best practices that can make math fun to teach for our instructors, as well as fun to learn for the students. A lot of times, most people are afraid of math, and everybody, you know the concept, but what is the best way to be able to convey the information to the students, and
Absolutely.
at the same time keep the students engaged.
Excellent. Thank you guys for sharing some of those. When we start moving through these next few slides, be sure to look for the piece that you just named, particularly if it was about confidence for students, creative teaching strategies. Look at the data that was gathered from the field test as well as from the first year that we pilot, after the pilot, where Mississippi was part of this group as well. Look for the piece that was relevant to you and how that outcome was for those teachers. The training has not changed since then. And most of the trainers were still the same trainers doing it. So hopefully that'll give you some insight into what you might gain or what your teachers might gain as we go through. And if you think of other things as we're going in, be sure to share those out as well. The overall vision for the original work that was done, which was called TEON. Let me back up for a second. The overall vision for TEON, which was the precursor to ANI, has continued throughout, and that was to help teachers, programs, and states build the capacity for higher quality math instruction in our ABE programs. And this is not to say that it doesn't include ASE students, adult secondary education students. It's the focus was on, we need to get these skills that are critical for our lowest level students, our ABE 2, 3, and 4 level students. We need to get their foundation solid enough so that we can capitalize on it when they become ASE students. We want to fill in a lot of those gaps. And so my hope is that and the hope of the ANI training has been that by training up the teachers with the strategies, like you're talking about, and the resources, and the skill sets that offer a different approach to math instruction for the ABE students than what they've maybe previously seen that was focused on procedure, that we'll be able to make an impact on that numeracy deficit that we're seeing in the country, and that the PIAC study in particular had highlighted. Each of the goals that you're going to be looking at and seeing as we go through these next several slides, each of these goals takes into account some of the data that was related to each of the goals that we examined from the pilot as well as from the first year after the pilot. And so you'll get a sense of how we met these goals, the intentional things that were put into the training itself, the things that we asked of teachers in between institutes. So teachers had homework, the structures we put in place to support the teachers and encourage them to go back and make use of what they'd learned so that we could in turn build on that. So you'll see some of those in these next few slides. This first goal is related to pedagogical content knowledge, which is basically saying more than just knowing the math. Math teachers need to know the content for sure, but they also need to know mathematical representations. They need to know the knowledge of the students and the knowledge of teaching and decision making. They need to have a variety of tools in their toolbox, in other words. This slide shows the 3 ways that we address this goal with the 3 different institutes. We explore the activities, and someone had named that as something they remembered, that how exciting it was, the active part of the activities, getting up and moving and engaging. We explore the activities that we expect teachers to go back and model themselves to do in the classroom. We let them see what it's like to be the student first, and then to evaluate it through the lens of being a teacher. We debrief every activity that we do so that they understand the math concepts, the connections between the math content and the domains, and answer some of the questions about teacher moves. What could they be doing differently when this activity is done in their own classroom? What things to look for? We also have teachers in between the institutes go back and test out some of those strategies and activities. We usually ask them to do a minimum of 6 activities in the month to a month and a half in between each institute. And for many of us who, as teachers, we attend workshops at a conference. They're usually an hour long. We sit through multiple, and it's just information overload. And we're excited about what we've learned, but it's hard to go back and put those things into practice. ANI is not a one-off kind of workshop. It's a very intensive training. And I think the most intentional and intensive piece of it is to go back and try it so that when you come back, we can build on top of what you've learned and make you even stronger than you were when you got there. And one of the ways we do that is with the classroom practice. We also ask teachers to provide work samples where they have to respond to specific questions of their engagement with the material and student involvement, questions that came up, student sample work. This was a high ability student, this was a mid and a low ability student, and let us evaluate what the student work looked like. And then we also ask them to do some reflection with their peers with an interim meeting between sessions, between institutes. The specific content that we focus on at each institute is from all 4 strands. And you can see on the screen that number sense is woven throughout each of the 3 institutes, because we believe that algebra, data, and geometry really are avenues for providing application of number sense. So even if a student doesn't know his or her times tables, that is no reason that he or she can't learn about geometry or about algebra. We can use those concepts or those domains to help students to apply those times tables down the road. We can help them to see the connection between patterning and distribution to help them better understand why the times tables are relevant and some of the relationships of the numbers that make it more likely that they'll retain the information. But we put it in the context of things that they may not have ever had a chance to really explore because there was this big obstacle in front that they had not conquered. So we incorporate number sense throughout, and we use some of the higher level, traditionally higher level topics all the way through because they provide great application resources. In the ANI pilots, teachers were given a pre and a post assessment as well as a survey in which teachers self-reported their comfort level and teaching strategies. After the ANI field test, and so I was a part of this group, and let me tell you, it was a very stressful thing to be a test taker in a room full of colleagues. And to know that when you come in that you think you know enough, you think you know what you're doing, and to read through questions and go, wow, I've never thought of math like this. It was a humbling experience, but I understand why it was done the way it was. So after the ANI field test participation, what came out of that, and this is from the final report, was that teachers' math content knowledge increased in all math content strands. So number sense, algebra, geometry, data, and statistics. It increased across the board. And for someone, I love math, and I was always strong with math. It was really surprising to see how much I could grow in something like number sense. I thought, gosh, really? Whole numbers, fractions? Surely I know enough. And I realized I could learn so much more. And so the pre and post test picked up on that and saw this trend that it didn't matter the subject, we all had room to grow. And the other thing it identified is that teachers' comfort levels in addressing specific math topics like number and operation sense, geometry and measurement, and algebra, that it also increased. So their comfort level as well as their content knowledge. And I heard that we had in Carolyn, Miranda, Christy, and Erlene, you were each talking about wanting your teachers to feel more confident so that their students could also feel confident. And that was one of the things the field test revealed, is that teachers gain confidence in something, all 4 of these major strands. And if they felt more confident, we have to assume their students sense that same comfort and gain something as well. This graph, again, may be a little tricky to see, so let me highlight some of the key pieces of it. These are teachers who participated in A&I, and it shows that they improved in those all content areas except geometry. And so let me give an example of why geometry didn't see that improvement. The geometry questions were items developed outside of people who were working on A&I. And as a result, the questions didn't align that well to the topics that were covered in the institutes. So for example, there was an assessment question about geoboards and how well teachers had used them in the classroom. Well, we didn't use geoboards in the institutes. And so there were some questions that weren't relevant to the way the institute was set up. And so it reflected in the outcome that we didn't see a big growth. We actually saw a little bit of a drop in the post test of that for the geometry. But even in a content strand where teachers feel pretty solid, like I said, with whole numbers and fractions, teachers are like, surely I know enough. It revealed that there's a lot to learn about the operations and how they work and how to make the steps and algorithms meaningful to students. And so this is why you see gains in those topics as well. And so the before is the lighter color, the after is the darker, and you see gains across number operations with whole numbers, proportional reasoning, fractions, decimals, and percent, some pretty big jumps as well. Everybody doing okay so far? Any questions?
Okay, we're okay.
Thank you. All right, so the second goal has to do with instructional strategies. And this was something I was hearing about what you were hoping to gain from it, with some extra, some ways to get more gains with increased and improved instruction, and also more creative ways of teaching math. So we'll explore in a minute just what we mean by instructional repertoire that you see on the top of the screen. For now, what you need to know is that in the institutes, we model what effective research-based math teaching should look like. We include visits by all of you, the administrators, as a way to support the teacher's growth. And by that means that you as an administrator should be on board with what effective teaching looks like and what it sounds like, because it stands in stark contrast to independent study. And for those who are unaware of what's going on, it can come across to some that students are having too much fun and they can't possibly be learning that much content. And so we want administrators to step into the classroom where these teachers are demonstrating what they're learning, visit them in between institutes, show them the support, show them that you're there to engage with it. If you're coming to Institute 1 and 3, we want you to participate. You are a student as well. And so I love it when an administrator comes into a classroom and sits down with the students and explores the activity alongside them, because it shows your own willingness to be vulnerable, try something new, listen and reason. And it also lets the teacher know that your support is there with them as well. So I want to get your thoughts on this question about what effective teaching looks like to you. Again, you can unmute yourselves. You can also use the chat box. Just give me 2 or 3 words that come to mind when you think of effective math teaching. What would that look like?
I think from my standpoint, it's more of a modeling what you expect from the student, being the example, making sure you give them adequate examples before turning it over to them and making them do it, and make sure you're modeling it, you're explaining it, you're giving them a good explanation of what's happening before you make them do it.
Okay, thank you.
We have a chat response from Tim. He states, teachers engaging students with practical examples that they can relate to.
Excellent.
I guess to add to that, not only modeling it, but walking them through the steps, step-by-step kind of thing, where you're with them every step of the way to get that knowledge across, and then letting them stand alone. I guess that's where I'm headed.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. So what I'd like to do now, and thank you for, was that Carolyn again?
Yes.
Thanks, Carolyn. Carolyn and Tim, thanks for sharing some of those ideas. What I'd like to do now is to show a short video clip of a teacher who is using her instructional repertoire, her understanding of what are effective teaching strategies, and how she's using those with a group of students. And those students are working on a lesson on ratios and proportions. And Tiara is going to help us to get to that video. You could probably hit the full screen, Tiara, if you might help out.
Hi, my name's Abby McGee, and I teach math at Notre Dame Education Center in South Boston. I'm teaching a pre-diploma class, which is a pre-GED math class. My students come from all over the world. I'm using the Empower lesson plans, which tie in with the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. And today I'm teaching a lesson on ratio and proportions. So this picture in your book on page 58 is a reduced picture of the Mona Lisa, and it's in proportion. It's just smaller than the original. The original, the height is 30 inches, and they tell you that. They would like you to figure out what you think the width is, because you know it's in proportion to the original, and you know what the height is. So using your rulers and thinking about ratios, can you tell me what you think the width would be?
So it's usually 30 inches both ways.
You think it's 30 inches both ways?
Like, because oh, no, I'm wrong. Wait a minute. If it's 30 inches up, going across, I think it usually runs like almost the same.
That's the height.
It depends on how the picture is.
And the wide is half of this. Could be 15 inches.
You think it's half of that?
Yeah.
You think that would be 18?
It counts 20.
No, 15. That's 30. Half of this would be 15.
How much?
Let's see. This is 30.
Yeah, 30
They say
inches.
30 inches, right? The height.
That's right.
30 inches
But-
in height.
That's what they give you. Yep.
And then
Okay.
20 the
And then
That way, I think it's
the wide.
up and down. I mean, up.
I think it would be 15 or to 18 inches.
No, it's 20.
You think 18 inches, you think 20?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna post these. So one guess is 18, one's 20. Okay, Myra thinks about 25 inches.
It's 20.
I'll write that down. So we're getting some different ideas.
That's 20 altogether.
We started with Huey's 18, then he changed his mind to 20. That's okay. Yes, he said 20. Myra says 25.
And 30, that's
Quite a bit bigger. We'll find out how much bigger we'll draw it. Okay,
This
so
20 is
your
correct.
answer is
Yeah, I think
20. We got another
that
vote
is
for
correct.
20.
I think it is 20.
Oh, now another vote for 20.
Yeah. It's 20 because
Two more votes for
you
20.
divide that into
20. So what was yours before, Myra? 25?
25.
Okay,
I
so
think
we'll
it's 20.
take this one out and you change your mind as
Yeah.
well. And we've got another 20. Okay, I think we have a consensus. Now, can you explain how you know You're right.
By-
It's 20.
Yeah,
Very good.
By using a ruler.
yeah, by using this ruler, 30 inches down and only 2 inches going across.
Right.
So if you expand that to, it would only come out to 20 inches going across. If you expand that, if you do that, the 3 inches times 10, it will come 30 inches, and 2 inches by 10, it will come 20 inches.
Okay, do you agree?
Yeah.
So 1 inch, what do you go, how many inches?
3. 30.
1 inch.
Oh, 1 inch is by 10, right, I'm
Right.
sorry.
You agree with me?
Yeah.
1 inch, and usually if we're talking about maps,
Yeah.
they usually say 1 inch equals so many miles.
Yeah.
In this picture, 1 inch equals 10 inches, so 3 inches equals 30, and 2 inches equals 20.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, so some of you may have seen that before. If you've done the A&I training, we do use that. I'd like to hear from you. What did you see are some of the effective strategies that Abby McGee used with her students? What seemed different? Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I will admit that that was one of the first things we implemented in our class was the sample of the Mona Lisa and the proportion, you know, how to explain that to the students. And that was one of the things that I guess stuck out with us in the beginning. And so that was one of the first activities we tried with our students. And they did a really good job on it. And it seemed like it made it clear to them what they were doing and what they were trying to do, what they were trying to accomplish after that activity. So that's what stands out in my mind is that was one of the Mona Lisa activity of the ratio and proportion was one of the first activities we did with the students, and they were really impressed with it.
Excellent. Anyone else see something in that video that was maybe different from how you learned it as a student or how your own teachers are feeling empowered to teach? I know for me, the first time I saw this video, I was really I felt bad for the students. I felt kind of uncomfortable. There's the one girl you can see on the screen on the left, and she is committed to her answer. It's 20. She was extremely patient, though, listening to all the other students share their answers, but she stuck with it and eventually persuaded through her own understanding the others. But I felt bad for some of the students who were really, you could tell it wasn't making sense, and they were trying to make sense of it, and they just couldn't get to the answer. My first time working with it, I felt like that seems really just harsh. But now I feel very different. I see why Abby McGee used those tools. And so part of what we'll do in our training time is negotiating and navigating what those anxieties feel like for those of us who were not taught that way, or who feel like our students need more support, that we need to support them and give them more guidance and probing toward that answer we want them to get to. We'll work on how do you get past that, and how do you support it with other instructional strategies that don't leave you with a sense of frustration or guilt or I'm not doing my job. And that's part of what we're doing in the training, is just helping teachers to develop that instructional repertoire that Abby shows. I can try and get to my next slide here. Oh, nope, we're not going to watch it again. Here we go. So A&I focuses on 4 big ideas throughout, and those ideas include communication, which is communication between students and teachers, as well as between the students, among the students themselves. Another big idea is the connection between the math content, other content areas, as well as the students' lives, which Tim had said he wants them to see math outside the classroom in their everyday lives. A third big idea is about redefining what it means to have mathematical proficiency, which is not just did I get the answer right and did I do it quickly. That's a very narrow focus of what a mathematically proficient student has. We want them to know the conceptual understanding, why this stuff works the way it does. We want them to have a variety of strategies so that if one approach is less effective, they can easily switch to something else. They can adapt their understanding and their reasoning. And we want to chip away at that unproductive disposition they have, that I hate math or I'm fearful of math, the math anxiety. We want them to develop a productive disposition toward the math by emphasizing the things that they know, showing them the strengths that they have. They're adults. They have a different experience of how they apply math, and we want to bring that into the classroom so that they get a full understanding of what it means to be proficient with math. And the fourth big idea is all strands at all levels. We've already hit on a little bit of this. We want number sense, data and statistics, algebra and geometry and measurement to be incorporated across all levels of students. All students should be able to do algebra, whether they know their times tables, whether they've mastered fractions. They should be able to do any of the strands and the domains, no matter their level. And that's one of the key things that we emphasize in the trainings. Based on the ANI data that was the pre and post results, as well as a self-survey and classroom observations. We had people that came into our classrooms before we started ANI, and then after we completed all 3 institutes and they observed our teaching. Those pieces of data revealed several changes. You can see 2 of those on your screen. They recognized that teachers reported being comfortable with these different approaches to teaching. They recognized that it was a good thing to let students discuss, even if they weren't sure about it. Just like we saw with Abby McGee, students weren't really sure. They were just testing it out, and they were challenging each other's understanding and sharing their own ideas. And that was a good thing. And the results showed that teachers felt more comfortable with that after they'd done ANI. They were more comfortable assigning writing activities as part of math, which was completely novel to me. And I thought, well, why didn't I think of that? Of course it makes sense. Would I have come to that on my own conclusion? Probably not. It took me going through 3 institutes to finally feel okay with that. And they also recognize that students really can work out answers themselves, and they can work it out together. We become less of a person providing answers. We're really more about asking the questions to help them draw those conclusions on their own. The other thing that, one other thing that the data revealed is that more teachers reported that they were using hands-on activities. They were getting outside of that procedure-based approach and incorporating manipulatives and letting students draw their understanding or write about their understanding instead of producing an answer. They could sketch it if they needed to. And they talked about being comfortable letting students work in small groups. They didn't have to work independently. Had a student one time who said, you know, if you get your answer wrong and you're working on your own, well, you're just kind of by yourself with this wrong answer. But if you're working with a couple of other people and you get it wrong, you're kind of sharing in that experience, and you can help kind of get each other through that moment of, I didn't get the right answer. How can we help each other? And that was just a big light bulb moment for me that, well, that seems much more realistic. That's how my work life exists. If I run into an issue with work, I have a team of people that I reach to for support. So why wouldn't we do that with our students in the classroom? Another piece of data that came out of this, the post-evaluation information, was that evaluators, when they came to the classroom, they observed the changes in instructional practices in those classrooms. Basically, they saw that the teachers had moved away from this predominant use of lecturing and talking, being the sage on the stage. They've moved away from that and the over-reliance on workbooks, and had started relying on hands-on tools, group work, partnered work, discussions, inviting students to bring in real-life context that they could work on as a group to problem solve. And those were some wonderful outcomes that we hope to provide you with the training for your teachers as well. Sounds like it's some of the goals that you have for your own program. So this data, very small print, but if you can see it, take a look at the data and just see if anything stands out to you about the data. Again, the light colored is before the ANI, the dark is after, and this is the level of comfort in using various teaching approaches before and after ANI. Does anybody have something that stands out to them? I'm going to share. Okay, so one of the key things of this piece of data is that it shows the teacher's self-reflection on their comfort in using these different teaching approaches. There was significant change in the teacher's comfort in teaching algebra concepts, and data and graphs, particularly to students who did not know their basic facts. That was probably the most shocking piece of data that came out of this, was this enormous shift in attitude about and comfort for teachers that they could continue to teach algebra, data, and graphs, even if students didn't have the basic facts all squared away. Here's another set of data. If you want to take a look at it briefly, this one shows the frequency of use of various teaching approaches before and after ANI, and their likelihood to use it after ANI. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of jump ahead here and highlight a few things, let you take a look at it. These pieces that I'm showing, whoops, let me back up here. These couple of pieces that are highlighted at the top two bars sections, and then a circled one at the bottom. This came from the pre and post survey results for the teachers about how their teaching changed regarding the ANI participation. The use of math investigations, you can see at the top, greatly increased. That top piece, the use of math investigations increased from 20% to 77% for those responding regarding the frequency in which they use that strategy. From 20% who said before ANI, I don't use a lot of math investigations, hands-on tools, graphs, exploring concepts, to 77% saying they frequently use it afterward. Similar to it is the arrow below that. This had to do with expressing mathematical thinking, letting students show different representations, and using open-ended explorations to introduce new topics. 33% before said they kind of used it. 80% afterwards said they frequently used it after the ANI. And then the last one circled at the bottom, this one had to do with following the sequence in a workbook. And so you can see the before was at 43% said they frequently followed the sequence in a workbook while people were preparing for the GED. After that, it dropped to 14%. And so it greatly diminished because teachers felt like they had alternate strategies that they could use for teaching those math concepts. They didn't have to rely on the workbooks after that. This is a quote that came out of the ANI data. It was related to the classroom observations where the people came in and observed pre and post ANI. And the bullet points highlight what was observed in the classroom before people participated in ANI. So they hadn't even done Institute 1. And this is what the people saw. Predominantly, they saw people were lecturing, students were doing independent work using GED prep books. There weren't manipulatives out in the classroom. Students weren't given resources to use beyond what was required in a workbook. Students were working not in groups. They didn't have any exchange. They didn't have any of the discussions that were going on that we saw in that video. And everybody was working toward, did I get the right answer? Instructors weren't asking for deeper understanding or reasonableness of answers. The questions weren't there because students were just driven to, did I get the answer? Can I check it in the back of the book? This is a follow-up quote from that final report that reveals what the evaluators observed after they had gone through ANI. And I'd like you to take a look at the bullet points as I quickly read them to you. After the participants had gone through ANI, they went back into the classrooms and they saw a significant change. There was an abundance of use of manipulatives to convey concepts. Students were working in groups. They were doing a lot of talking together, partnered work, group work. Teachers were predominantly using A&I activities. In other words, they were modeling what they had learned from the institutes that they had participated in as a student. They were using some of the resources, maybe that we didn't spend a lot of time on, but they knew they had the resources and there was good stuff in it and they used them. And they were using more application of math from real world settings. They felt more comfortable reaching into situations around them versus what was provided in a workbook. And the key point is that the nature of doing math post A&I for the teachers who participated in this field test, the pilot, those same shifts we expect will happen for your teachers. That you'll see this shift from a silent, individualized classroom to one where students are actively engaged. They're talking to one another. They may be left for a while to wrestle with a problem and figure things out with their peers. And the teacher is no longer the sage on the stage. The teacher is truly that guide on the side, helping them to navigate those questions and uncertainties. Third goal of A&I is that our training focuses its attention on a set of standards explicitly. The college and career readiness standards in adult education will be looked at during the institutes. We'll ask teachers to consider the standards as they're developing lessons, and especially as they're working on their work samples that they provide in between institutes 1 and 2, and then again through 2 and 3. When A&I was developing its assessment protocols, the A&I developers were asked by OCTAE to take out all references to standards. And then later, after tools and protocols were developed and approved, us trainers were allowed to talk about the state standards in the institute. So even though we don't have any pre and post data on the use of standards, this quote that you see on the screen from the final report on A&I indicates that A&I had some effect on teachers' efforts to incorporate standards into their instruction, even though we don't have the hard data to compare that with. Fourth and final goal is the key goal for A&I, and that is that for it to become institutionalized within a state. To that end, I will be observing teachers looking for potential teacher leaders. We have Cindy Heimbach and Etienne Otis, who will be trained as trainers, A&I trainers during the 3 institutes. So they'll be kind of a dual role. They'll be as a participant and also with the lens of eventually leading these trainings themselves in the state. They will also help me identify some additional potential state leaders. So you can help me with that too. If you know you've got some great teachers who are going back in between institutes and you see them putting these skills into practice and they're shining, you can see them learning and growing. Please share those names with us because we're trying to develop a good pool of people in Mississippi who can continue this work. All of these individuals that we see and that you report back, we'll share with the state, and we'll hopefully put some energy toward trying to develop those into the leaders who will continue the training throughout the state. Based on A&I field test data from the program administrators, A&I has made an impact on the states. And because administrators had a better understanding of what effective math instruction looks like, they were better able to support their teachers as well. After A&I, the majority of the administrators who attended Institute 1 and 3 reported feeling more comfortable and prepared to support the teachers in implementing specific teaching strategies taught in A&I. They also felt the teachers should be using specific A&I approaches more frequently, and they felt comfortable being able to talk about if they were or were not. And the majority of administrators rated A&I excellent, or they would definitely recommend it. So all of that's to say, your predecessors have given good feedback, and we hope we can deliver the same experience for you. We're getting down to the last few minutes, so real quick on this piece of data. The field test data from the program administrators suggested that A&I, like we said, made a difference. And they reported being comfortable supporting teachers as they tried out a variety of instructional strategies. The 3 examples you're going to see here in red, those highlight the A&I's big ideas about all strands at all levels and connections between content areas. And you can see the growth before and after. And again, this is program administrators. These are your colleagues, your peers. That's the growth on teaching algebra, using data and graphs to people who don't know the basics, and using geometry and algebra together. Look at the growth, 25% versus 64% after. It felt very comfortable with supporting teachers on those areas. The blue ones, These illustrate instructional strategies that were related to the big idea of communication, allowing students to discuss, have group activities, work together to share answers. Program administrators felt much more comfortable working with that in support of their teachers. This last set of questions is more of a reflection I'm going to send you back with, something to chew on, and to encourage you to begin thinking now about how you can use ANI now that you've learned these, the outcomes, how you might use it to jumpstart your professional development for your cohort of teachers. What model do you want, and how can you support them, in particular directly related to numeracy instruction. And those are the same questions, by the way, that Tiara sent to you. They're the last 3 questions that were on that list she sent. Of the 471 teachers who were surveyed in that first year that we launched the ANI after the pilot, 2012 to 13. So those of you who went through 2011, that's what's on your book, you were in this group. You're one of the 471 who were part of this fiscal year. They overwhelmingly reported satisfaction with the delivery of it, the format. Yes, it takes 6 months to get through, but look at the people, how they felt about the format and delivery. Look at how well it went for the 400, in this case, 69. Had a couple of people who didn't respond. They were strongly in favor of the way that the training was delivered. And that same group of people, all 471 people responded that the trainer was knowledgeable about the topic, provided opportunities to ask questions, gave quality feedback. The delivery was effective, and it met their expectations, or exceeded their expectations about it. So this is the kind of training that, even though it's 6 months long, to be able to get that kind of result, to me is impressive. And I say that as a teacher, not as a trainer. It's impressive to go to a training and still love it after 6 months. You feel really amped about it. As a person who does the training, I come away always learning something, having learned something new from the teachers going through it. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to skip over these quotes from the participants and kind of jump to the meat of this. Oh, I forgot to put Mississippi in there, but this is for you guys. This is the Mississippi ANI timeline for 2019-2020. We have our first institute coming up October 8th and 9th at Table 100 in Flowood. We'll be doing some classroom lessons. We'll model those both days. Teachers will walk away with a work sample for homework, and we will set up a couple of interim meetings. Right now, it looks like we're talking about doing some Zoom meetings across the state. I would love if we can get some classroom observations. So during the Zoom sessions, we can talk, teachers can talk more specifically about observing one another. You are a part of that conversation. So again, you being in the classroom for classroom visits is an invaluable resource. The last 2 institutes will be sending out information, but they're at Flowood. Oh, actually, I think I've got Institute 3 is wrong. That's also at Table 100, correct, Tiara?
That is correct.
Okay, I will correct that for you. So all of these are at Table 100 in Flowood, December 2nd and 3rd, and February 4th and 5th. And teachers will continue to have homework in between, work samples in between as well. What questions do you have of me in the remaining 30 seconds?
No questions for right now.
Okay. I look forward to being there with you, everyone. October 8th, we will be sending out information on check-in process and those who needed to come in early. I think all of that information will come out from Tiara. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate your support of your teachers and look forward to meeting you on the 8th if I haven't already.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.